it's shaking this time. What's up, guys? This is zenkistyle, and right now I'm going to finish off where I left off the other day with this never fear painting. I love that name because so many people fear painting. What I got here is my painted part. Excuse my words there. My painted part from the other night, and other morning. We'll get correct with that. As you can see, though, I've been sitting here with a piece of sandpaper, and I've kind of scuffed it up just a little bit because, as I said the other morning, I keep wanting to say night, guys, because I normally make these videos late at night. The first several were made late at night. Anyways, but the other morning, I took and sprayed this piece, and it was still pretty cold. As you can see, right here from this top edge, for how cold it was, this paint turned out fairly good. As can be said, you can also see where I've scuffed that up some, and the reason I scuffed it up is because what we're doing today, we're going to want some traction. We are definitely not going to want to have gloss when we're hand painting something. And the reason you're not going to want to have gloss is because you want the paint to stick. Well, to a point, acrylic will stick there, but not as well as it does to matte. So I scuffed that up so that we have a little bit of traction there. This right here is a very, very good deal. It's about $4 or $5. I got these at Walmart. It's like $4 and some change, almost $5. Comes with 10 brushes. As you can see, I already took some of the brushes out, and I put this in this little case I had. I had this sitting around. I would suggest buying a brush case of some kind to keep your detail brushes kind of out of harm's way, more or less, because these fine tip brushes are going to be the ones you wind up using the most when you hand paint. Because most likely when you hand paint, if you follow the ways I'm going to teach you to do things, it's going to be for detail and not for surface area. But some of us, that's about going to be the cheapest way for us to work, because a little bit of this goes a long way. Now what I have right here is one of my favorite products for hand painting, and that is Vallejo Model Air. The reason why, because it's pre-thinned for airbrushing, and although it really kind of airbrushes, to my opinion, like doo-doo, it does an amazing job right here with hand painting. So our first color right here, now like I said, you don't have to get expensive and fancy with it. These little $5 packs of brushes, they'll last you forever. In fact, I'm so adamant about these because I burn through brushes left and right, and you probably will too until you learn how to properly care for your brushes and clean them and take care of them. I'm going to start with this right here, though, and what I'm going to do, I have this little lid. This is just a lid from your average, like, what is the name of the, I'm trying to think of a name brand. A little storage container, a little food storage container, and that's all it is. This ain't even a name brand one, it's a cheap one. I just took the lid from it, started using it because the container got damaged. Ooh, I'm getting a little tongue-tied there. As you can see, my paint's gone through a little bit of heck. It's bounced around in the back of my truck. I haven't really messed with it much since I got here. Recent move and X. Oh, we got plenty of it there. I'm going to pour some of that out. As you can see, I'm just shaking these up. It's not a whole big ordeal. Now, I am using a couple of different colors here, but this is just really to show contrast with what we're doing here. This is not really a serious effort. This is for fun. As you see, I'm just pouring little bits of this out here. Now, these are regular paints here. They're regular colors, nothing special. Only thing that can be said about it is that they're Vallejo Model Air. And the reason, like I said, I liked it pre-thinned. You can see how it sits there. That is not quite full consistency for this. It's a good consistency for details. I'll show you why here in a second. This is actually a wash. It's oil stains. It's a gloss wash. I'm not really sure the significance of that. I'm sure there's a reason. I'll Google it, right? Maybe one of you guys know why they make washes in gloss and non-gloss. I think that's actually to replicate fresh fuel is probably why that's in gloss. And I'm going to get my jacket off too so that I don't get paint on it. So number one thing, you want to protect your clothing from paint. That's why I have this little piece of foam right here, is to wipe my brush off on. Now I want to show you another thing. This is my water jar. The reason why I chose to use an old Tamiya glue jar is because I've done drank from the cup a couple times now and I ain't doing it again. Secondarily, I can't get too many brushes piled up in there. So we'll get through that in a second, because I don't know if my big brush is gonna fit. I might have to go get a cup. But for the most part, you're not gonna be using super huge brushes. When you hand paint, you want to match the brush to the surface you're painting. You can see I just dropped the water in there. And you can see how my brush lines up with that part very well. This will make it a lot easier to paint the part. If you're trying to paint this huge area with a tiny brush, you're not going to have a good time at all. You're going to have a lot of brush strokes. It's going to look really messy. And the tricks in this is that you want to cover it as few times as possible, or in reality, as thinly as you can get away with. Now we're going to see if I can fit my big brush in here, because let's use this for an example. If I'm trying to paint that little crack, I don't want to take this wider than you see? It wouldn't do me any good. I'd be getting excess paint out here, create a ridge I don't need. So let's see, first of all, that one fits, so I'm just going to rinse it off and put it back away. Looks like there's some kind of protective coating on these to keep the bristles stiffened up before you never really paid attention to that. I normally just dip it in the water and start painting with it. Kind of a oily coating. Maybe somebody might know what that oily coating is. I don't really know, but okay, my big brush fits. So if you're going to paint this larger area, you're going to want a bigger brush. As you can see, look how much more better that is. It covers the area much better. It would allow you to do it with less brush strokes. Now, I've already put out paint, so one thing I will note is you always want to keep your brush wet. It doesn't have to be super soaked, but you want water in that brush. Actually, I somehow get the feeling that oily feeling's probably some leftover Tamiya thin cement in there. I might be wrong. I'm not really too worried about it. As you can see, we're going to go over this, and it's just point blank and simple. You're going to want to thin this coat across here as much as you can. It might not fully cover the first time. We're not expecting it to cover the first time. All we're trying to do is get a coat on there. And you want to try to maintain the brush strokes in about the same direction. The more brush strokes you have in physical use, the more brush strokes you're going to have in the paint, especially as it starts to dry. Now, I really don't like having to hand paint this whole part this way, but this is just par for the course here. Like I said, I make a mistake, you will see the mistake. While we're doing that and letting that kind of cool off and dry for a second, I might have to bring the heater over here. It's probably going to be stubborn right now. I want to show you guys what I found today. That was my nippers. I'd been looking for my nippers. As you can see, they're sitting in basically WD-40, because they were sitting in my truck and back glass is busted out right now. I went to jail and then a mental facility, and a bunch of crazy crap happened while I moved back to my dad's house, and he didn't know they were out there. I had not a clue either, otherwise I would have told him to get them. So I'm having to recover my nippers. That's about a $40 pair of clippers that are, yeah, you see that. It's probably going to take about 2 or 3 days sitting in that, a couple cleanings to get them nice and rust free, but is what it is. Now I'm going to look at this. We are most definitely going to need the heater closer by. So I'm going to grab my heater. See you guys, this is the joy of working out close by nature in a shed that is unheated. It's a nice shed. I ain't complaining. And I most certainly should have been more careful and more preparative. Another thing is, I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything in all reality. I'm just trying to show you guys that you don't have to have $500 freaking to start building these model kits. In all reality, all you need is a table, some place to sit, a few cans of spray paint, which if you're doing high grade models, you ain't gonna need much. You know, you can just take a simplistic can of primer. And now note, my paint would have laid down better had I been painting on a gloss, or excuse me, a matte. I said that wrong. My paint would have laid down much better. But as it is, I didn't have any matte left. So I made do. I made do with what I had. Let's see if I can get this on screen, because I'm actually using the heater right now to advance the drying of the paint. Put away this. I'm sorry guys, I gotta put away some of these excess parts. I got some parts out for other stuff that were off camera. And as you can see, I'm sitting here drying this part. It's also some cold weather stuff, you know. You guys that live in colder climates, it can be very hard to paint, and although this can be done indoors. There's no fumes, there's nothing bad. Let me make sure this is still on camera. Oh yeah, close enough to it. Hey, it's kind of nice for me too. Let me check my camera again. As this dries, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use less water this time and a little more paint. I actually use my pants leg to soak that up, but that's because I'm trying to get as much out as possible, and as a habit, I usually use my pants leg, guys. I'm sorry. But as you can see, I'm going to start working on getting this in. And I'm going to try to avoid the details that I want to paint with other colors, just because, like I said, trying to keep the brush strokes about the same direction. You want to be careful when you hit spots like here. Right now, that was some pretty thick paint I laid down. But once again, I will say, this is why I like this Vallejo. And here, it might be 2 or 3 weeks, I'll show you guys a trick to remove some of these brush strokes. I'll describe it for now, and it's simply in between coats. If you have a decent matte spray paint like that Tamiya, you can actually lay it down and do a light wet sand over that coat and then come back across. As you can see, this is laying down pretty well right now. And I'm trying to, I know I'm going the opposite direction, but I'm just kind of trying to watch what I got. But as you can see, that coming together. Now, I'm going to dip my brush back in here and try to get it clean again. One thing I will say about the brushes, you want to try to keep the paint in the bristles. Once it gets into, I believe this is called the knurling. Anyways, once it gets into this part, it'll start messing up the brushes and the bristles. It'll make them start to break apart and spread, because what happens is the paint wedges up into here and causes the brush to split. You want to try to maintain these brushes as long as you can. I know myself, last year, just practicing alone, I spent probably $100 on brushes, because I would forget or have to do something and go to sleep or so on and so forth. It wouldn't go the way I'd want it to. Now this is somewhat mediocrely dry, and I'll note that you can take and try to kind of work out brush strokes with just a little wet brushing. It doesn't always work out for the best, but reality here is I'm just trying to show you how to kind of sort of work with painting a larger surface. What I'm really worried about is this lovely little tiny surface in here, because for the most part, if you have money enough to get a couple cans of spray paint, you're already going to have your base color in. So you're going to be wanting to paint this right here. This is where I want to show you the real magic. This is why I love this Vallejo paint. As you can see, I'm getting quite a few brush strokes in there. And this brush is very, very wet. As you can see, I'm just filling it in there nicely and neatly. Trying to get a little bit of tack down in there. That is a very wet bit. Oh boy. This is gonna look terrible. I'm just kidding, guys. I don't intend it. I'll repeat again. I don't intend this to look amazing. I'm just trying to show you that you can grab this stuff and do it yourself. You can grab just about almost anything and force it to work. And here we go again. But you see what I'm saying about the size of the brush? The size of the brush makes a big difference. So now that's actually fairly well filled in. I only got a little bit of overage, which is nice. I prefer doing this on matte. I didn't have the option this time. So I'm working with what I got. Might not be beautiful in the long run, but hey, is what it is. And I'm over here freezing. I'm gonna take advantage of this heat myself. Once again, back to the heater I go. You know, guys, I did not really think about this with the cold and it being the way it is, that it was going to take so long for this stuff to dry. The reality is I'm not working with alcohol here, I'm working with water. So I'm waiting for water to evaporate out of this paint. And as you can see, that Vallejo, and this is why I like it, it levels pretty decently. It's not perfect looking, but I could cover that with a lacquer, clear, and very well smooth out any brush strokes you see in there. As I said, I like that process of, I can actually show you an example of that. If you want to see a piece I hand painted completely that way. Remember, guys, sometimes the end result doesn't always reflect the work to get there in hand painting, because this end result right here doesn't look too terribly bad other than being dirty from sitting around. If you note, it looks pretty there together. It looks almost like I pre-shaded it in some places. But in all reality, it starts off looking like this, a bunch of garbage. So don't let that first bit of paint you lay down decide how it's going to end. I forget who it was. I know this guy's name, Bob Ross. Bob Ross himself said to make happy little trees out of accidents. Had to turn your accidents into happy little trees. Well, that man was definitely right. Because as dirty as this still is, and it's dusty, I can see it's dusty. This was actually meant for something entirely else, but I repurposed it. It's got a stand. And when I'm done with it, it'll be one of the fighter jets from, ironically, Top Gun. Top Gun, yeah, I believe it's Top Gun. But it's waiting on a canopy. I lost the canopy in a move. Yeah, moving really bites. If you're working on model kits, try to move in a manner that, you know, is organized. I kind of had a hurry in this, so I didn't really have much of a choice. Now, I will show you once again, I love this paint. It's so thin already, but it lays very beautifully. Very, very beautifully. You see on this next pass-through coat, I am totally covering that. Now, it's still pretty wet, but the fact of the matter is you don't want a bunch of really dry coats on this. And the reason being is that these wet coats will level out better. Might not look as pretty when you're done. Watching the first coat dry, it might not till the second or third coat. In fact, in some cases with that plane I just showed you, I had 2 or 3 coats where I was like, this ain't gonna work, but I'm gonna keep trying, and I'm gonna keep flat clearing, and I'm gonna keep wet sanding. Oh, there you go. There's another coat right there. And normally I would not, get my cigarette out of my mouth. Sorry guys, I'm a nicotine fiend. Normally I have a vape here. Normally I would not do this whole painting two colors at once ordeal, but I just want you to see what I'm doing with my hands. You know, right here I'm stabilizing. See how I'm using the other finger to stabilize this? So I know some of you might be shaky handed. You're going to say, well, my hands are too shaky for this. Well, so are mine years ago. You don't get better without practice. So you got to get some mistakes in there made. Like somebody said today, the only way to success is going to be through failure. You're not going to succeed the first time. But if you keep trying, you will get it. That's all that matters, is that you try. Look at this. See how I'm using my finger to stabilize not only myself, but the part. Any of you guys can do this. Hey, look, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to work in that little edge. See how I turn my brush? See, it ain't got to be all brush strokes. I mean, normally I just do this for fun. I'm not doing this because I want to be famous. I'm doing this because I enjoy this. I enjoy the fight. I enjoy watching the paint level out. Yes, I said it. I enjoy watching paint dry. And we'll come up here, put it back to more heat, try to get it to dry up more for you guys. Now, I also want to get a little wild out here, so I'm going to clean my brush again. Like I said, this is just a little piece of foam. I don't even remember what it came out of. You can use a paper towel to do that. Doesn't matter. I mean, all reality, does it really matter? I'm doing this for so much fun that I am actually putting this blue in here just kind of for shits and giggles. Now, you'll notice I picked up a good bit of this blue and I didn't keep it very, very wet. The reason why is because for finer details, sometimes it's easier just to put a thick layer of paint on it, especially when working with this acrylic. It keeps you from having multiple brush strokes in there. And as I've found, as you start to try to brush stroke away at smaller areas, it just doesn't seem to work out very well. I don't know what it is with it, but it's like the more I brush stroke away at that area, the more it just picks up the paint. Listen. Whew. Whew. As you can see though, we're going to keep going through layers, and see right there, I'm not happy with how it's sitting, and I can see it. You see the little bubble there? So what I did was I got my brush wet, and I'm going to just put the water in there. That water will help level that out. You can see how it's full of water right now, but just that should have helped me in leveling it out. See, I'm just wiping this with my finger. Thin coats, wet coats, and some kind of drying aid, apparently in the cold, is handy. Normally I would just wait for that to evaporate off. In this case too, I'm really only painting one small part. Normally if you're doing this, you're going to be doing parts in batches, so you'll be doing more than one part. As you can see, trying to maintain similar direction to what I was doing. Now with this part, it probably would have been better to go like this, but I'm just trying to show you guys what you can do. And you see these little light brush strokes in there. And I just got it super wet. Oops. I thought I'd damp more out of that than that, but as you can see, layer after layer, that paint is building a good finish. Bring it back over here to heat. I'm trying to think of many other things that I can really talk to you about right now, but about as simple as dry the paint and come back. We'll have many sessions like this where I have to wait on something. I intend for you all to see what building is really like. It's not always a quick cut and dry process. I'm not going to use editing. I'm not going to use fancy footage. In fact, I actually went to start this video, and that's what's funny. I actually started it and had worked on it, and it went terribly. I don't often want to take a retake, but I was so disorganized compared to how I thought it was that I was like, no, I can't give you guys this. This is the one mistake I can live with. Not having everything out properly set up to start the video and having to talk for 5 minutes before I touched brush to part, that was not okay. So, guys, I'm not willing or unwilling to listen and learn. As you can see, I've stuttered some through this video because this isn't typically something I teach people how to do. This is typically something that I just do on my own, and if I do teach people, it's through typing. I have a little bit of time to think my thoughts out. Some of the other things that I do, well, I know them like the back of my hand. And hand painting on a gloss that I just sanded is not really something I typically do. Normally I use a flat or flat clear, and just I'm so supplyless right now that this is just the way it goes. I'm sorry guys, I moved and I haven't really had time to deal with stuff. Now I'm going to try to keep this where you can see. Sometimes you got to use the edge of that. Like look, I'm going to use the edge right there, and then I'm also going to use the edge right there, and I'm just going to edge it up in there. Bam. See, I'm using my other finger to stabilize. I'm keeping as straight a stroke as I can. And by now, if you've got it, you can pretty much clip this video out. I'm just going to finish this part because I am going to drop a wash in here. As you can see, that turned out pretty decent on that blue. So I'm going to dry this up, and I'm actually going to take a little bit more of this blue. And this is why I like this Vallejo Model Air, because it really is a little champion. It's out of the pot just about thin enough to do hand painted details and then look very good. In fact, I can just damp this off again, and these little areas where I got a little bit of blue over coming, we're going to come back and touch up. See, I ain't got to get out the big brush to touch up that area because that'll dry pretty well the way it was. And let's see, I did that, dropped some paint there. Dropped a little bit of paint there, bam. I do want you to pay attention. The more brush strokes you have to make, the more likely you are to have them show in the paint. So try to avoid that. Try not to make a bunch of brush strokes. It's not really good to make a bunch of brush strokes. Try to keep that knurling on that thing clean. And now I'm going to do a little bit of a wash. And you know what? For this wash, I'm going to use the corner right here because washes are, well, essentially a wash is a really thin paint. And the reason why you want to do a wash is to fill in edges around recessed detail. But considering that this is a pretty matte surface and I just painted it, we're going to use a detail brush for it. And also, see if I got, oh, we got lucky. I had all like one cotton swab in there. These are one of my favorite things. They're Tamiya cotton swabs. They're really good at soaking stuff up and cleaning stuff up. All I'm trying to do right now is drop a little bit of wash. This is how I like to do panel lines, and how, most of us need to be learning how to do panel lines, or even fill in around this stuff. Because this edge right here, you can fill in with this wash. And when this wash dries, because it's so thin, it's not going to show up like regular paint. It's just going to slightly darken in that edge. As you can see, I'm just loading my brush up with it and letting it kind of float in there. Understand, when you put paint on a brush, it's like you're loading the brush, for lack of better terms, and you want it to float out of the brush, especially when it comes to a wash. So a fine tipped brush is very good for laying this wash in here, and where it beads up, it's going to show pretty good. Where it doesn't, it'll kind of fade. I'm hoping you guys can see that still pretty good on camera. And this recess detail right here, I want to do the same thing again. Just fill in the recesses. Load up my brush. Now I normally like doing this on glosses. The reason why you want to do a gloss for washes is because it cleans off of it a lot better. It'll just about wipe off. As you can see, it's wiping off right there. Got a little bit of fuel stain on there. Now we'll just do a little streaking. Because that's another thing you can do with washes. You can do a little pin streaking. However, this is not really oil, so let's get all that dried in there. A wash, once again, just a really thin paint. You can make a wash with just about anything. You just have to thin it down enough. It's very nice for panel lines. See, that one didn't go as well because it was on of matte, but if it had been on gloss, that wash would have flowed through there. And guys, it's just a little bit of hand painting. It's not the best hand painting in the world, but it goes to show you that even with some of the worst conditions, you can get a pretty decent finish. Which, if I was to matte coat that, it wouldn't look terrible. It wouldn't be the best paint job in the world. Somebody wouldn't cry about it though. More than likely, if I matte coated that and wet sanded it, somebody would probably actually compliment it. Alright guys, just remember, anybody can build anything. Zenkistyle out.